I've always been a morning person, not out of ambition nor stress, just rhythm. By the time most people were still debating coffee or shower, I was already out the door, keys in hand, ready to face the day. Mornings are clean, predictable. I like that. My name is Reed Marshall. I spent 11 years in that office, not as a manager, not chasing promotions, but as the guy people counted on when things got tight. The one who never missed a deadline, never dropped a ball, never stirred up drama. I wasn't flashy. I just got things done. That Monday, I was in by 7:30, like always. The office was quiet, the way I liked it. I reviewed the presentation we were finalizing for Friday, the one for the biggest client we'd ever landed. I'd put the structure together myself, step by step over the last month. It was solid. All it needed now was final sign-off. At 8:03, the elevator dinged. And that's when everything changed. She walked in like a thunderclap, tall, polished, every step sounding like a verdict. New director. We'd all heard the memo late Friday, but there hadn't been time for introductions. Some assumed she'd observe for a week or two, feel things out. They were wrong. By 8:15, she had us gathered in the glass conference room. She stood at the head of the table like she'd been there for years. No small talk, no easing in. "I'm here to restructure and streamline," she said. "We have a lot of inefficiencies, and the board expects results, fast." Her voice was smooth, clipped. She talked like someone who had already decided who mattered and who didn't. I didn't speak. I watched, listened. And then she looked at me. "Mr. Marshall," she said like she was reading a label on a box, "could you step outside with me for a moment?" It wasn't a request. It was a setup. Everyone in the room knew it. She wanted a moment, but not in private. We stepped out, just outside the glass walls, still in full view of my team. "I've reviewed your file," she said. "Impressive, but this department needs a new rhythm, fresh energy, new direction." I waited. "We're letting you go, effective immediately." That was it. No review, no conversation, no warning. She had decided I represented the past, and she was here to install the future. I could have pushed back, could have told her about the Friday presentation, about how none of the files were yet centralized, about how every question the client would ask was something only I had prepared for. But I didn't, because I don't fight for jobs. I fight for results. And if she wanted to lead without understanding what was holding her foundation together, I wasn't going to stop her. I just nodded. Understood. And that was that. I walked back to my desk. The office was dead silent. A few eyes followed me, some wide, others lowered. No one said anything. They didn't need to. I didn't pack in anger. I didn't slam a drawer or throw a look. I moved calmly, gathered what was mine, left what belonged to the team. By 9:10 a.m., I was gone. And she, the new face of leadership, had made her first power move. Some would call it bold, others reckless. By Friday, it would be obvious which one it was.
Tuesday came and went without much fanfare, at least not for me. I spent the day at home, sitting in the quiet of my back porch, sipping black coffee and letting the rhythm of the wind do what it does best, remind me that time keeps moving, whether you're ready or not. I didn't reach out to anyone at the office, didn't call, didn't text. I've never believed in hovering around a wound after it's been cut. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let it bleed clean. But by midday, the messages started coming in anyway. "Man, what just happened? Are you okay? Things are weird without you here." I didn't respond right away. I knew most of them meant well, but I also knew the team was walking on eggshells. One wrong word in a hallway could land them on the chopping block too. That's what happens when leadership is built on fear instead of respect. People stop collaborating and start calculating. By evening, one message stood out. It was from Jenna, our project coordinator. Smart, reliable, and often underappreciated. She kept everything running behind the scenes, and she knew the inner workings of that Friday presentation almost as well as I did. Her message was short, She asked where the final analytics files were. I told her you kept them local until the last review. She didn't take it well. I leaned back and exhaled through my nose. It wasn't sabotage. It was just how I worked. I always finalized things on my end before uploading to the server. That way, there weren't 3 half-baked versions floating around while people were editing in real time. It wasn't a secret. Everyone knew. Even the last manager appreciated it. Apparently, she didn't. She'd expected to walk in, fire the old guard, and slot herself into my seat, as if legacy and structure were just add-ons you could replace like furniture. But the numbers, the graphs, the logic behind the pitch deck, that wasn't stored on the network yet. It was in my head. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. That's not who I am. But I did realize something important. She wasn't just unprepared. She was unaware. The worst kind of leader, confident in the absence of understanding. And she was about to stand in front of a Fortune 500 client in 3 days. I didn't want to watch her fail. I really didn't. I took no pleasure in people falling apart. But there is a quiet power in absence. Sometimes, the best way to be heard is to say nothing and simply not be there when it matters. That evening, I opened my laptop and looked at the files, the graphs, the strategy, all of it complete, organized, but not yet delivered. I hovered my mouse over the folder for a moment. Old instinct told me to finish what I started, but I closed the laptop instead. She made her decision. Now the consequences belonged to her. By Wednesday morning, the company group chat was unusually quiet. No memes, no good mornings, no inside jokes. Silence spreads fast in an office when people sense instability. It's like animals in the wild. They smell danger before it arrives. I didn't hear from anyone that day until just after noon. That's when Jenna messaged again. She's asking everyone for fragments of the presentation. She has no idea how it was supposed to flow. I could picture it. Bullet points pulled from outdated drafts, charts missing context, pieces of a puzzle she never bothered to learn how to assemble. The team was doing what they could, but it was clear. Without structure, even the smartest people start spinning in circles. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat by the window. The same pitch deck that had taken me 3 weeks to build, data models, risk projections, competitor mapping, now lay dismantled, its core logic fractured across multiple inboxes and half-finished PDFs. And the irony? She probably thought the work had been beneath her. When people think leadership is about commanding, they miss the point. Good leadership is about comprehension, about knowing the terrain before you try to lead others across it. By mid-afternoon, I got another message. This one from Victor, one of the quieter guys in operations, not someone who usually reached out. She just called a full team meeting to regroup. She's scrambling, Reed. He didn't need to say more. Scrambling. The word told me everything I needed to know. A few minutes later, another buzz. Jenna again. She tried to present what we have so far to the client team lead as a preview. He told her to stop mid-sentence, said it looked cobbled together. That was the first real blow. Previews were common in our line of work. A quick 5-minute call to reassure the client that Friday would be solid. But if the preview falls flat, the client starts questioning everything. The budget, the timeline, the team. And that's when executives start paying attention. I leaned back, arms crossed. The thing is, I had built a quiet trust with that client over the past year. Not by promising the world, but by delivering, consistently, one clean file at a time. I didn't sell sparkle. I sold clarity. They liked that. And now they were seeing the opposite. She had tried to take the wheel without a map. I could almost hear the conversation happening behind the scenes. Who signed off on this? Wasn't Reed in charge of that account? Why was he let go 3 days before the pitch? She'd only been there for 72 hours, but the consequences of her choices were already catching up. The glass conference rooms that once made her look transparent now made her panic visible. I didn't bloat, but I did feel steady, because I knew how this would play out. Not with shouting, not with sabotage, but with silence. The kind that speaks louder than blame. Wednesday ended with one last message. Jenna again. Client team is asking to reschedule Friday's meeting. They want more preparation time. She says we're still on track, but she's sweating, Reed. I didn't reply. I just looked out at the fading light and let the quiet stretch out around me like armor. Some battles don't need to be fought. They just need to be endured.
Thursday started the same way as Wednesday had ended, with silence. But this time, it wasn't just tension. It was anticipation. The kind you feel when a storm is too quiet. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat on the porch with Scout, my old golden retriever, curled at my feet. He's always been good at reading me. That morning, he didn't wag his tail much, just rested his head on my boot and waited with me. By mid-morning, I got a call. Not a text, not an email. A call. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Reed Marshall? Yes. This is Henry Talbot. The voice was familiar, calm, deep, and always about 10 degrees cooler than the room. Henry Talbot, our CEO. We'd only spoken directly a few times. He wasn't the kind of executive who micromanaged, but when he called, you listened. You didn't get second chances with him. Not because he was harsh, but because he didn't need to be. I assume you've heard what's been happening, he said. I've heard a few things. Silence. Then, I'll be in the office by noon. I'd like to see you here by 1. He didn't ask. He didn't apologize. Just gave me a time and a place. I agreed. When I hung up, I just sat still. Not because I was nervous, but because something had shifted. I'd expected her to burn out, yes, but I hadn't expected the fire to reach the top floor this quickly. She must have triggered something. Maybe it was the failed preview with the client. Maybe the board had heard murmurs. Or maybe Talbot had simply seen what happens when you cut a pillar out of the structure and expect the roof to hold. At 12:40, I pulled into the parking garage. I didn't go through the main lobby. I took the executive elevator, the one I'd never used before. At 12:58, I was ushered into his office. He didn't waste time. I've seen the pitch deck, he said, gesturing toward a tablet on his desk. The current version. I said nothing. It's a mess. The client is considering pulling out. He leaned forward. You were the only person in that department who understood the entire scope of this project. Why didn't you upload your materials before you left? I hadn't finished the final review. I never upload partials. He nodded slowly, like a man connecting dots he didn't want to admit were obvious. And you didn't interfere? No. You didn't send anyone anything? Not even to help? No. He looked at me, not with suspicion, but with something closer to Respect. Good, he said, because I needed to know the failure was hers, clean, uncontaminated. That's when I realized. This wasn't just about a presentation. It was about leadership. She had come in swinging, trying to impress the board, cutting the person she thought was disposable. She wanted to be noticed. She succeeded. Just not the way she expected. Talbot stood. I want you back in the building tomorrow. I'll handle the rest. I nodded once. And read, he said, as I turned to leave. I looked back. I never should have let someone walk in and cut you without a conversation. For the first time all week, I allowed myself a small breath. It's okay, I said. But we both knew it wasn't. And tomorrow, the correction would be public.
I arrived at the office before 8 a.m. Not because I had to, not even because Talbot had asked. I came because this place had been part of my life for over a decade, and if I was going to return, even temporarily, I wanted to walk through the doors on my own terms. Familiar faces looked up as I passed through the main floor. Most of them didn't know what to say. A few nodded, a few just watched. Jenna, standing near the coffee machine, mouthed, "Thank God," with a tired smile. I nodded back. The client presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. The big conference room had already been prepared. Slides on screen, water bottles lined up, notepads untouched. She stood at the head of the table, still tall, still polished. But this time, she wasn't radiating confidence. She was wearing it like a borrowed jacket, one size too big, sleeves starting to slip. She didn't acknowledge me at first. I didn't force it. I took a seat on the side, just out of her direct line of sight, as Talbot entered from the far door. No announcement, no handshakes. He sat at the far end of the table with a calm expression, the kind that makes other people nervous. The clients arrived right on time. 2 men, 1 woman, all sharp, all seasoned. They'd seen enough presentations to smell blood before it hit the carpet. She began. "Thank you for being here. I'll be walking you through the finalized proposal for Q4 implementation." Her voice was steady, but her pacing was off. She rushed through the first few slides. Numbers didn't quite add up. Terminology was swapped in awkwardly. One of the clients tilted his head. The woman scribbled something, then stopped altogether. By slide 4, the lead client, Carson, raised a hand. "Can you clarify how these projections were calculated? We're seeing a 13% swing that wasn't there last month." She blinked, then smiled. But it was the wrong kind of smile, the kind you use to stall. "Well, that section was compiled collaboratively, and—" "That's not what I asked," Carson cut in, calmly. "How were they calculated?" Her pause was longer this time. And then Talbot spoke. "Reed," he said without looking at me, "can you speak to that?" She froze. All eyes turned. I stood, walked calmly to the screen, picked up the remote, and with one motion brought up the original model, clean, detailed, built slide by slide with logic and care. I spoke with clarity, not ego, just facts, just structure. The room shifted. The clients leaned in. Carson nodded slowly. The woman began taking notes again. I only spoke for 5 minutes, but in those 5 minutes, the difference was undeniable. When I finished, I stepped back without looking at her. Talbot closed his folder. He said, "We'll circle back with final revisions. Thank you, everyone." The clients left. One of them gave me a brief look, a half smile that said everything. She was still standing.
but something in her eyes had gone quiet. Talbot waited until the room was nearly empty. Then, softly, "Ms. Dalton, my office, now." So she had a name after all. I sat back down, poured myself a glass of water, and waited.
I didn't follow her when Talbot called her in. I didn't need to. There's a certain silence that follows a decision already made, the kind of silence that tells you the next word spoken behind a closed door won't be a negotiation. I stayed in the conference room. Jenna brought me a fresh cup of coffee. She didn't say anything, just handed it to me and sat down across the table, exhaling like someone who had been holding her breath all week. "She really thought she could fake it," she whispered. "She did," I said, "until she couldn't." 10 minutes passed, then 20. At the 30-minute mark, the door to Talbot's office opened. She stepped out, her face unreadable, but her eyes were no longer sharp. There was no more posture, no more performance, just a woman who realized too late that titles don't come with wisdom, they come with responsibility. She walked past me without a word, no glance, no bitterness, just gone. She didn't return to her desk, didn't gather her things. Someone else would do that for her later. She left through the side exit, alone. And just like that, the person who had tried to make an example out of me became the very example she never wanted to be. I stood up slowly, stretched my back, then walked toward Talbot's office, where his assistant gave me a nod and opened the door. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking down at the courtyard. "She's out," he said simply, "effective immediately." I didn't respond. He turned to face me. "I'd like to offer you your position back," he said. "Same salary, same benefits." I met his eyes. "I appreciate that," I said. "But I think we both know things don't go back to the way they were." He nodded slowly. "You're right." "Then, what do you want, Reed?" That caught me off guard. I wasn't used to being asked what I wanted. I took a breath. "I want to rebuild the team properly. I want space to train new leaders, ones who don't lead by fear. I want to make sure what happened this week never happens again." He stared at me for a moment, then nodded once, firm. "Done." It wasn't a grand gesture, no parade, no standing ovation, just a quiet correction, the kind that matters. By the end of the day, I'd moved into the office she never had time to decorate. I didn't touch her things. They were already boxed and moved out before I arrived. Jenna brought me a stack of pending files. Victor dropped by with a coffee and a grin. The tension in the hallway lifted like someone had cracked a window open. And as the sun dropped low against the horizon, painting the office floor in gold and shadow, I sat behind the desk that was now mine, not because I demanded it, not because I plotted for it, but because I earned it, silently, honestly, without stepping on anyone to get there. And that, I've learned, is a kind of revenge that leaves no blood, just balance. Monday morning came with a strange kind of quiet. Not tense, not uncertain, just still, like a field after a storm. I walked into the office carrying the same travel mug I always used. No fanfare, no announcement. The plaque on the door had already been changed. But I didn't walk any differently. Some people looked up. Some smiled. Others kept their heads down, unsure if things were safe again. That's what fear does in a workplace. It lingers longer than the person who caused it. Jenna met me in the hallway, a tablet in hand. "You've got 6 emails flagged by operations, 3 by legal, and 1 request to move the Q4 timeline up by 2 weeks, she said, walking in step with me. I smirked. "Good morning to you too." She laughed, for real this time, and it felt good to hear it in the building again. I held a team meeting at 9 a.m., same conference room. No standing at the head of the table, no glass walls to intimidate. Just me, sitting in the circle, coffee in hand. "I'm not here to give you a speech," I said. "You've all been through enough of those." There were a few quiet chuckles. "I'm just here to say we're not rebuilding from scratch. We're rebuilding from what worked. And that starts with trust, from me to you, and from you back to each other." I looked around the room. Some heads nodded. A few people sat straighter. It would take time, but I knew how to earn trust. You don't demand it. You demonstrate it, one decision at a time. I didn't need to erase what had happened. The absence of her presence was its own lesson. Instead, I started planting new seeds. I pulled Victor into one-on-one mentorship sessions. The guy had potential. He just needed to be shown that input mattered more than volume. I looped Jenna into strategy meetings, gave her decision-making authority she'd never been offered before. She didn't hesitate. And as the week progressed, something incredible happened. The team got faster, not because of pressure, but because the fear had lifted. People weren't looking over their shoulders anymore. They were looking ahead. On Wednesday, I got a message from Carson, our lead client. "Thanks again for saving that presentation. Just sent over the updated agreement. Let me know if you want a review before Friday." The contract had been renewed, despite everything. That night, I stayed late at the office, alone. The place was quiet, lit only by the glow of monitors and the skyline outside. I looked around the room where I'd once been dismissed like an extra in someone else's performance, and now I was rewriting the script. Not with revenge, with restoration. Because the best payback isn't making someone else fall. It's showing what rises in their absence. It had been a week since I stepped back into the office. In that time, the air had changed. People no longer whispered in hallways. They laughed again. Doors stayed open. Meetings ran shorter, not because we rushed, but because we trusted each other to execute without constant oversight. I didn't rebuild the team. I just cleared the fog that had settled over it. And in doing so, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her, not at the way I was dismissed, not even at the silence that followed. Anger needs friction, but I had none left to give. What replaced it wasn't gloating, it was clarity. That Friday, I stayed late again, not out of obligation, out of rhythm. I've always liked the quiet end of the day. That's when things settle into place, when the noise dies down and only the essentials remain. Jenna passed by my doorway as she packed up. She stopped. "You know what's funny?" she said. I looked up from my laptop. "She thought you were the easiest one to cut." I smiled, because I didn't make noise. She nodded. "Turns out, silence is harder to replace than volume." She left after that, and I was alone again. I looked around the office, mine now, technically, but I hadn't changed much. The walls were still bare, the furniture still modest. I wasn't interested in branding the space with ego.
My work didn't need a nameplate. It spoke for itself. There was one box in the corner I hadn't touched, left behind when her desk had been cleared. I hadn't gone through it before. Figured someone would collect it eventually. But something made me open it that night. Inside, a few folders, an unused planner, and a small notepad. On the first page, a handwritten list. First impressions. Cut weak links. Establish control. Be seen as decisive. Remove resistance early. I stared at the last line. Remove resistance early. I wasn't surprised. I was sad. She hadn't seen a team. She'd seen an obstacle course. And she'd never realized that the person she marked as resistance was the one holding the bridge up. I closed the notebook, set it aside, and turned off the light. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the chrome panel. Older than when I first started, sure, but sharper. Not an edge, an understanding. Leadership isn't about asserting yourself. It's about making others feel safe enough to do their best work and stepping forward only when it counts. That week, I hadn't said much, but what I didn't say, that was the lesson that stayed. And if she ever wondered how it all unraveled so fast, I'd offer her only this. You mistook silence for weakness, but silence when chosen is power.